Welcome to day 2 of the Phoenicians. First, I wanted to say that I noticed a lot of you yesterday were taking photographs of the slides, which is totally cool, but also you can just download them if you like, put them up. The links work, as far as I know. So please, if you want to look at them again later, you're welcome to download them. And I'll show these links again at the end. Okay, so first there we go. First, I need to make a correction, unfortunately, to yesterday between my jet lag and various cold medicines. I made a rather unfortunate mistake on one of the early slides. When I talked about the Greek etymology origin for the word Phoenician, I put the wrong Greek word down. I put the word for palm tree instead of the actual word. It's very similar, phonekios, which is, again, scholars make a connection perhaps with that also, maybe that's an origin. But here's the correct Greek, right? So if you took a picture of that slide yesterday, please delete it and take a picture of this one instead. If it states, oh, I don't know what's going on, is this me or is this thing? Okay, hopefully it'll stay with us. Okay, so that correction. Oh, why is this happening?
Is the God. Is the God.
Okay, yeah, keep saying no, but it's... I think it's with me. Let me see if I can, I think it's... Oh, it's... In the meantime, though, while we're waiting, does anyone have any other questions they wanted to ask, or were you too afraid to ask? There are no dumb questions. It's fine. In the back.
What's the difference between the Philistines and the Phoenicians? Is there a relationship?
They are definitely different. So it's a bit of a mystery, right? But the Philistines occupied the area to the south, in what is kind of southern Israel today, and it's speculated that the Philistines may have been one of the mysterious sea peoples, right, that the Egyptian sources talk about, specifically the Pelskets. Maybe. And it's thought also perhaps that they came from the Aegean region, but again, this is all rather speculative. But certainly, the term Philistines comes from the Bible, right? The Bible is very clear. The Philistines and Phoenicians are not the same, even though they're both on the coastline. So that's maybe the most straightforward way to think about it. Another question? Yeah.
When you speak about cedars, is that a cedar trees, which I take were what we were in Lebanon with the cedars?
Yes, exactly.
What part of the conifers is a cedar?
I'm not a biologist or a tree expert. Is anyone here? Maybe we can cross-verse this. The Lebanese cedars, like what their exact genus or species do?
There's about five different types of conifers. The cedars are one of them. Many different cedars. That's all you need to know.
Sorry,
It said there's about 5 different species of conifers, and cedars are one of them. They're quite famous. If you Google Lebanese cedar, you'll start to get a whole bunch of information. There's not very many left, unfortunately, due to continual logging over the past 2,000 years. But there's still protected groves in the Lebanese mountains that you can see. But unfortunately, like so many things are disappearing. There was a question over here. Yes.
We learned at school that the Greeks added the vowels into the Phoenician alphabet. Is that still correct?
Yes. Of course, so there's other languages that don't necessarily write the vowels, right, like Arabic and Hebrew, although they have ways of noting them with extra notation, but it's not actually necessary. And in fact, it may seem a little odd to not write the vowels, but you don't actually need them, right? Even with English, try writing a sentence with just consonants, and you'll be able to read it because you'll know from context what it is. But the vowels are thought to, help with vocalization, although even that's a bit of a red herring, because honest, when you think in English, how many vowel combinations we have that are pronounced differently, right? So, how many different vowel combinations we have for the E sound and so forth. So I think there's a lot of debate about whether or not vowels were a great addition or not, but we're stuck with them, I think. Okay, it looks like it's going to work. Yeah, great, thank you. So there were some questions about chronology yesterday at the end of the lecture, and I've tried to avoid chronology because it's kind of a black hole. But again, just for your reference, and like I said, if you want to download these slides later, I'll be referring to some of these periods. But this is the basic chronology that archaeologists use when talking about the history of the whole Levant. We're going to talk mostly about stuff from the Iron Age today. Of course, a question yesterday about do the Phoenicians, do they go back to the Bronze Age? The inhabitants of the city-states that we call Phoenicians certainly did, so it's probably safe to say. Yes, would we call them Phoenician? Would they call themselves Phoenician? No. But they're probably the same people. And but the stuff we'll be looking at today is mostly from the Iron Age and then also the Hellenistic period. And the thing I wanted to point out that I mentioned a little bit yesterday was that the Phoenician city-states, they were independent from each other, but they were often subjected to the authority of a larger empire. And for them, it was always a negotiation of trying to retain their autonomy, as well as kind of keep the relationship with these greater powers amicable. So there's lots of giving tribute, lots of cooperation. For the Persians, the Phoenicians provided a fleet, but there were also times of conflict. At least until the Hellenistic period, the Phoenician city-states, the main ones, had kings and had enjoyed a certain level of autonomy. Starting in the Hellenistic period, the monarchy goes away as an institution, and instead they're ruled by councils. This isn't very radical because that's how it worked in the West. Carthage was governed by a council, as were a number of other cities in the West. And it's also thought that even with the king, there was still a governing council with which the king had to cooperate. I didn't want to get way into the history, the political history, because we'll be here for days, but just to give you a little bit more of the context. Okay, so since we're talking today about the archaeological and material record, I wanted to just briefly remind about the limitations of the archaeological record. And of course, we are largely limited by what survives, and not all things survive equally, right? So things that are made of stone survive the best. Also, certain metals can survive through time. They often don't, though, because they're valuable and they can be remolded and reused. It sounds like an angry
Can I just also ask you something?
Yeah.
Your necklace is matching the microphone.
Is that what's created?
Yes.
Got it. I wasn't sure. Thank you. No, it's fine. I can take it all. That's better. Right, so the things on the left survive well. So stone, glass, and clay, fire, clay, ceramics, because they've been fired, right? So they're pretty durable, even though they break up. Metals would survive if they're not reused, although certain metals like iron and bronze, they do corrode over time. Bone should probably move more to the left because it survives pretty well. And then the things to the right that are more organic, they don't survive as well, especially in an environment like Levant, because we're not in Egypt, sadly. We're not in the desert, in which all of these things can survive pretty well. So when we look at what we have left of Phoenician material culture, we're getting a very skewed picture, right? We're missing textiles. We're missing wood. We can tell from the way they carve stone that they seem to be using a lot of techniques we would associate with woodworking. So presumably there was a lot of wood sculpture, but we just don't have it. We do have some shipwrecks, but they're deep underwater and difficult to study. So there's a lot we're missing, but we have to do the best with what we can. Another limitation, let me go back for a moment, is that the main city-states, right, Tyre, Sidon, Byblos, Beirut, Arwad, they've been occupied for a millennium, right, continuously for thousands of years. So they're also difficult to extract information from. It's possible, but because they've been rebuilt over and over and over again, a lot of the earliest stuff is just gone. And even today, we can't just ask people to knock down their houses and go looking for what's underneath. So sources, our best sources of information, archaeologically, don't come from the main city-states. Instead, they come from smaller settlements that were abandoned at different points in history. And so, then that's where a lot of the work is happening today. So, with all those caveats, what I've done is I've selected a number of objects and buildings, genres to go through today. I mean, we could talk about Phoenician art and archaeology for a whole semester, but I've tried to highlight some things, mostly from the Eastern Mediterranean, because that's where I work in the Levant. We're going to cover the topics of religion, iconography, and then also a couple of discoveries related to Phoenician craft and commerce. So, to start with religion then, there are a lot of great surviving examples of temples, and this is one of them. This is at the site of Amrit, ancient Marathos. It is, I'm sorry for flipping back and forth, it's on the mainland across from the island of Arwad, a small, offshoot settlement. And it is in the form of a large basin that's cut into the bedrock, with a little central shrine called by scholars a naos in the center that's also carved out of the bedrock, mostly. The basin is surrounded on three sides by a portico of square pillars, and it was open on the north side, and it was fed by a spring that seeped in through a particular wall. And in terms of the decoration, what you can see here is there is some decoration that survives. You have these little jagged, pointy things, right, that are referred to as crenellations. They come from Mesopotamian architecture, where they're very common. And then they're on top of cornices, a type of cornice that's called the cavetto cornice, which is very common architectural embellishment from Egyptian architecture. So one thing that's characteristic of Phoenician art and architecture is that because they are such big travelers and interacting with all kinds of people, they bring a lot of artistic and visual ideas from the different people they interact with. Now, these remains are all a bit in disarray, so perhaps it would help to have a reconstruction drawing that was made by the excavators. Now, I should point out that there is no standard Phoenician temple type, not the way we think of, say, Greek temples, right, which are instantly recognizable. That said, there are some common elements. Often there's a central shrine, such as this. Often water is an element at Phoenician sanctuaries for various parts of the ritual, especially cleansing. As for what gods were worshipped here, this is a little unclear, but it seems that Eshmun, perhaps other healing divinities such as Melkart and Shadrapha. Ashmun in particular was a god associated with healing. The Greeks recognized in him, Asclepius. I have a feeling it's the laptop. Let's try to get one. Or it's a connector. These modern technological machines, you have to buy all these adapters and they fail. They're expensive. It should work. Yeah. Okay. Try that for a while. So as I was saying, the god Ashmun, the Greeks identified him as Asclepius. He was especially connected with healing. Unfortunately, I don't have time to get into all the complications of religion, but the Phoenicians had a similar system of belief about the gods as the Bronze Age inhabitants of the Levant. There was a large pantheon. There were certain gods associated with particular cities. Oftentimes it was a pair, a female goddess and then her consort. The female goddess is almost always some local variation of Astarte. And then the male god varies, but there's a lot of overlap. It's a very fluid system. You have local versions of deities, and then you also have overlapping characteristics and spheres of different deities. So you just kind of have to go with it. Let's see what else I wanted to mention about this. Right, so in the center, the shrine in the center, what was in it? Well, it was empty when they excavated it, but what might have been in it? Presumably some sort of cult object. What might it have looked like? Well, the small square shrine, enclosed on three sides with an open front, is a quite common design in Phoenician art. We have a few actual physical big ones standing, like the one I just showed you, but much more common, we have it in miniature model form. And these are referred to by archaeologists as nice scoring, little knobs, basically. And in these little model versions, and they are, I know they look huge here, but they're not. They're like maybe this big, or they vary. And then inside these little shrines are often these abstract objects. Sometimes one stone, sometimes two stones. They're often a little bit like an obelisk, though tall and narrow, or they might be smaller and ovoid shaped. Occasionally these little shrines are empty, and very rarely you get a human figure inside. But what's very common are these stones, which are often referred to by scholars as simply the standing stones. And we give references to them in literature, and we've also found excavated examples of them in sanctuaries. So at the sanctuary at Ashmun, near Sidon, here's several examples of these kind of tall, column-like stones that have a decorated top, and then we also have a relief. I'm really sorry about this. I think it's I'm pretty sure it's my adapter. Yeah. I have to turn it into a PowerPoint because it's not, it's on a Mac program right now. But I think we can just deal with it, it'll be okay. Right, and then we have this relief where we have a woman actually. She's all veiled and wrapped up, and she's standing in front of a column with her hand up in the gesture of adoration. So there's some belief that these objects are objects of veneration, and that the deity inhabits it somehow. But obviously they're non-anthropomorphic, which is very interesting, and scholars have been paying close attention to that. And we do have some literary testimony about this. So for example, Herodotus talks about Melkart, whom the Greeks knew as Heracles. And he talks about visiting the temple in Tyre, and he mentions there that there were many votive offerings, but he noticed two pillars. He says one of gold and one of an emerald stone that shine. Maybe they're golden, who knows? But this idea of the two stones associated with the sanctuary persists for centuries after. Even in the Roman period, we get coins from Tyre showing these two stones that are clearly of a sacred significance. And also we get this description in a poem, an epic poem by the Roman author Silius Italicus called the Punic. It's an epic poem about the Punic Wars. And he talks about Hannibal visiting the temple of Heracles or Melkart in Cadiz. And he gives a whole description in there. And if you read it, it'll sound rather Semitic in a lot of ways. There's no, it says somewhere in there that no pigs are allowed. The priests are celibate. The feet are bare, the head are shaven, so forth. And what is most remarkable to Silius Italicus, no statues or familiar images of the god. I should put the Latin, it's simulacrum, right? So no, which means the type of images that the Greeks and Romans were accustomed to in temples, which are anthropomorphic ones, right? These statues that we know that they worshipped. So there's this understanding that perhaps the Phoenicians didn't worship anthropomorphic statues. And so that's led some to suggest that the Phoenician religion is more or less aniconic, much like Judaism. Is that really true? It's a little complicated because we know that the Phoenicians certainly thought of their gods in anthropomorphic form. They do represent them as such, as we'll see in a moment when we look at some different sources of iconography. And certainly a standing stone, it may not be anthropomorphic, but it's still a symbol, which is the definition of an icon, right? So it is iconic in that respect. But it seems to kind of be in a blurry kind of area. And one way maybe to think about it is to compare with Christianity, where in Christianity there are images of Jesus abound. right? But the rituals involved in Christianity do not involve actually worshiping a physical statue of him, at least not most of the time. So it's it's perhaps not either or. Right. So that's about kind of images of the gods and so on. But what about the rituals themselves? Well, sacrifice is the cornerstone of Phoenician religious ritual. Animal especially, but other goods as well. And this is one area where Phoenician inscriptions have been helpful. This inscription was, it's called the Marseille Tariff because it was found in Marseille in the harbor. It was probably used as ballast in a boat after it was no longer needed in its original location. But the text itself tells us that it was originally from a temple of Baal in Carthage. And in this text, it's a very dry bureaucratic text. It simply lists the tariffs for performing sacrifices. So you have your sacrifice that you want to give to the god, and you want to go to the temple, and you need the priest's help to carry out the ritual. Well, you have to pay. There's a fee. And part of what's going on here is simply to regulate, right? To regulate the prices and make sure that no one's getting exploited, and to kind of eliminate corruption and make everything fair. Different levels of sacrifice, different types of animals were more expensive than others. So a large quadruped was more expensive than a bird. Interestingly, the text tells us that if you're doing multiple sacrifices at the same time, you only have to pay for one. The others are free. And the end lines mention fines. They mention a fine for priests who take illicit payments, we can assume off the books, right, on the side. Because presumably the temple's taking some and the priest is taking some, presumably. And also there's fines for worshippers who don't pay. So we can maybe hypothesize that there's some sort of honor system to a certain extent, or at least an account system. So it's quite interesting because it gives us kind of like the functioning of religion, the very kind of the bureaucracy of religion, which we don't often think about. So it's not just, animals of course were sacrificed, but it's not just animals that are gifts to the god, it's also statues and statuettes and figurines, and there's so many. This is common to most religions in the ancient world, the Greeks, the Romans also. And there's so many different examples that we could look at, but I chose these, which come from a sanctuary outside of Sidon in the sanctuary of Ashmun. It's a little bit outside of town. And we have this series of statues of infants and children that are made out of marble, out of Greek marble, and they date to around the 5th or 4th century BC. The children are typically usually naked, or they have one cloth. The infants are usually boys, but there are some girls, older girls represented as well. They often have something in their hand, either an animal, like a turtle, or a bird, or a ball. The meaning is not entirely clear. And these ones are very high level of artistic skill, and this one in particular, we know thanks to the inscription, they don't always have inscriptions, this one does, that this was actually a member of the royal Sidonian family. The statue which follows Shalem, it says, son of Baana, king of the Sidonians, son of King Abdamon, king of the Sidonians, and so on and so forth, offered to the god Ashmun at the spring of Edel. That's the name that they gave that spring. May he bless him. This is a very standard formula, right? The person who's giving the offering, his genealogy, usually just the father, but since he's a king, he does some more. The fact that he's giving this to the god, names the god, and then there's usually some request at the end about a blessing. Now, presumably this is given in exchange for some sort of, for well-being and health. It's thought that maybe since infant mortality and childhood mortality is quite high, that's an explanation for these types of statues. I don't think I mentioned presenting statues of children and infants has a long history in the Levant, especially Cyprus, and then in the mainland as well. And it's not sure if it originates with the Phoenicians or with some other people on Cyprus, but it's definitely adopted by them. Let me see, is there anything else? Okay, so moving from specifically religion, although we never really leave it behind, to more about iconography, the most comprehensive corpus of material we have with showing Phoenician iconography and symbols are coins. Now, coinage was invented in the 6th century in Western Turkey and quickly spread from there and was adopted by the Persian Empire. You can understand why. Coinage makes it much easier to collect taxes from people and to redistribute wealth and so on. And it seems to have been adopted by the Phoenician cities in around the 5th century, although the barter economy definitely continues side by side. It's not an either or. So, certainly not at this point. I've chosen this particular coin, it's the one on the left, you know, the obverse and the reverse, because it shows how the Phoenicians, and in this case the Tyrians specifically, were heavily influenced by the art and iconography of the people that they interacted with, but it also shows how they adopted this imagery, you know, for their own purposes and to reflect their own identity and their own point of view. So on the obverse, we have a bearded divinity who's often taken to be Melkart, who was the chief god of Tyre. He's literally called the Baal of Tyre. And he's carrying a bow, and he's riding a winged hippocampus, seahorse. Underneath him, you've got the representation of the sea, and then a dolphin to kind of really drive home. Sorry, the slide's a little dark. To drive home that image. Now, the image of the god himself, at least the upper part, seems to be a deliberate quotation of coinage that's currently circulating, that's put out by the Persian court of the royal archer. It's meant to either represent the king directly or at least the kingly spirit. And it's a symbol in the Persian context of his dominion. He's got his bow, he's got his spear, right, all the weapons, you know, and dominant, you know, all over the land. But what the Tyrians have done is they've taken that image and changed it to a sea context. And also notice that this one has a crown, that one does not. It's part of also why it's got probably a god is meant here. So while the Persians are dominant on land, the Tyrians, somewhat slightly, are suggesting that their god, and by extension they, are dominant over the sea. And so that's the obverse. If we go to the reverse, sorry, you can't see it very well. So is there a way to... I'm just going to turn it off just for a moment so you can see a little better, and I'll turn it back on, I promise. So on the reverse, you've got the owl. You got an owl, and then you've got two symbols there, a scepter, a crook rather, and a flail. And what's going on with that? Well, oh no, that's the wrong picture. Tragic. Sorry, this is not supposed to be here. It's supposed to be something else. I'll have to describe it to you. Shoot. Anyways, so we have the you have this owl on there. This is not going to make sense. Let's start with the crook and flail first. Where do those come from? They come from the Egyptian iconographic record. The crook and flail are symbols of pharaonic power. But they're also used by the gods. The crook itself seems to represent the authority. The flail it's a little less clear, but the flail is used by shepherds, right, to guide and get their sheep into place. So it's thought to be a representative both of the kind of might, right, the physical way of controlling, but also of protection, because that's what a shepherd does. Okay, can you just bear with me for a second? I really need the correct image. I'll turn the light back on. Maybe. see it's a bit different. Okay, I've covered up the label, but what this coin is, it's an Athenian tetradrachm. And Athenian tetradrachms become very popular as currency. They're like the dollar, right? The American dollar. They work almost everywhere, not quite, but they're trusted. Let's put it that way, in the 5th and 4th century. And they have this owl, which is associated with Athena. So the question is, what is the owl doing on the Tyrian coin? As far as we know, owls have no meaning that we've been able to determine in Phoenician lore, ideology, or anything. It seems what they're doing is that they are basically just copying the Athenian coin. Why? Well, part of it could be about authority, right? Now, these coins are more or less worth their weight in metal at this point, but currency still demands faith, right, and trust. And that's part of why currencies today more or less follow the same pattern, right, the same general pattern, and you don't get huge differences. You get small differences, but the basic type, money is typically the same. It has, someone's head on it, and certain conventions are similar. So it seems that is what the Tyrians have done. They've taken the Athenian owl and put it on their coins to maybe, promote the status of their currency, to make it more reassuring. But they didn't entirely copy the image, right? The owl is quite different stylistically. It bears more resemblance to the Egyptian owl. That's one of the core Egyptian hieroglyphs, with those little horns, right? And especially the long tail feathers. Although, again, it's not exactly the same. They've kind of done, somewhat of a blend and created their own owl, if you will, to distinguish themselves. And again, going back to why the crooked flail there, it must be some allusion again to their god, I would think, to the both the might and protective abilities of their gods. So I just put this example up here to show that the Phoenicians often have a reputation for this copying other people's art, but it's not just copying, it's not mindless. They do, they find inspiration and then they do it thoughtfully, in their own way. Staying kind of in the same type of medium, let's switch to Scarab Seals, which are always fun and interesting. So the Scarab Seal is an object type that was originally Egyptian, but was adopted by the Phoenicians as well. So seals, in case you don't know what they are, seals were used to literally seal documents. So papyrus rolled up, tie it with a string, and then seal it with something malleable, like a small piece of clay, with an impression from a stamped seal. Now, scarab seals are a particular type, like I said, from Egypt, and they are typically made of stone, gemstone, or glass, and they're rounded on one side and flat on the other. And then they are mounted usually in some sort of either a bronze swivel ring or a bracelet or some kind of metal mount that can be worn around the neck. Now the rounded side is carved to look like a dung beetle, a scarab beetle. Why? It's not exactly certain, but scarab seals become very popular in Egypt going back to the Middle Kingdom, so way before what we're talking about now. And the scarab beetle has religious significance in Egypt as it's associated with the rebirth of the sun god Ra. He takes the form of a beetle when he emerges in the morning. But it's not clear to us if it means the same thing for the Phoenicians. But they definitely adapted, and and these remain popular. And amongst these seals, we see all kinds of different motifs. Egyptian iconography is very popular. Later on, Greek styles and Greek iconography becomes popular as well. But again, with the Egyptian ones, there's a strong emphasis on religious themes and magical themes. Here we have, so that's an Egyptian original one, and here is one from Pharos in Sardinia. And you've got the falcon, the Horus falcon, who's a protective deity. His arms are surrounding a cobra, who's also a protective but also dangerous deity, but associated with power and might, with a double crown of Egypt on its head, and again the crooked flail. Down here is a lotus flower, which is associated with rebirth in Egyptian context. Again, we have to speculate what it means in Phoenician to a Phoenician, but we must assume that there's some sort of, these symbols all have to do with otherworldly power, right? So perhaps protective, perhaps having to do with the afterlife. Here's another example I wanted to show you because it mixes Egyptian and Phoenician, specifically Phoenician iconography. And this is what I meant by a swivel ring. So it's not really a ring that you would wear on your hand, but rather through this loop there would be a chain or something you could wear it around your neck and then stand away as you like. And what we have going on here is we have a seated, presumably divinity in a throne, under a kind of canopy, which is taken from, we'll see in a moment, Egyptian architecture, flanked by a couple of figures that are wearing Egyptianized dress, kilts, and hats, kind of the crown, the white crown of Egypt. Above there is a winged sun disk, which is again a protective symbol. And the throne you're sitting in is a sphinx throne, right? So the armrests are in the shape of sphinxes, these winged, half woman, half animal, fantastic animal shape. And then there's another example, this time that's more in pure Phoenician style, although you do get the moon and the sun up there, which may or may not be derived from Egyptian iconography. This in front, if you're wondering, is an incense burner. And the deity, presumably, if the deity is there in this kind of this religious gesture that we see again and again. Just to make it clear what I'm talking about when I talk about these Egyptian visual influences, maybe you can see it more clearly. So you've got this pavilion canopy at the top. This row these are cobras, right, with the sun discs on top. You can see them at the top there as well. And you have the seated figure, but notice again the difference in the throne. There, I think this is Amenhotep III. He's seated in a regular, fancy throne, right? But here he's seated in the Sphinx throne. So what about these Sphinx thrones? They pop up quite a lot, actually, in Phoenician iconography. They seem to be a particular object of Phoenicia, and they appear in both relief and in three-dimensional form. So in relief, they're often shown with a deity seated. So here we've got a person standing before the deity. It's often labeled as Astarte, so these are often called Astarte thrones, but we don't know. And we already saw in the previous example, this guy has a beard. It's probably not Astarte, unless we really don't know that much about the gods. But you'll see them in textbooks and literature as labeled as Astarte thrones, because they are sometimes connected with her. And so the relief version often shows the deity, but the three-dimensional versions never have a deity seated in them. Instead, they're either empty, or they have, again, one of these stones, these non-anthropomorphic abstract objects, or they have symbols like the sun or the moon. And it's quite interesting because it goes back again to that question of how Phoenicians visualize their gods and in what medium, what form. It seems to suggest that they are quite happy to visualize their gods in these in two-dimensional scenarios, and these kind of symbolic types of jewelry and other representations. But when it comes to actual objects of worship, such as these thrones, because these thrones are found in temples, in a situation they're clearly being honored or worshipped. So these objects of worship, they don't seem to want to represent the actual deity in an anthropomorphic form. Rather, it's thought that for these thrones, the spirit of the deity is there. Moving to the funeral realm I wanted to, out of the various options, I decided to show you some of these Anthropoid Sarcophagi, as they're called. Because they're called that because they're sarcophagi, they're coffins, and they're vaguely in the shape of people. But they're rather minimalist. They have, the heads are shown, and occasionally other parts of the body, like the one in the center, has feet and arms. Some don't have that much, some might have knees or a little bit of clothing. And so they're somewhat abstract. They are peculiarly Phoenician. That is, they only appear at Phoenician sites. Not all Phoenician sites, but only Phoenician sites. And the idea for them seems to clearly be taken coming from Egyptian sarcophagi of the same period, especially in the 6th century. And we know this in particular because the Sidonian king ran off with an Egyptian sarcophagi and buried himself in it, inside it. And it's thought maybe he did this at the time when the Phoenicians were part of the Persian army and the Persians were invading Egypt, but really the Phoenicians go places all the time, so there's lots of opportunities. But this particular sarcophagus was pre-carved and ready to go for a certain general Ptah. Unfortunately for him, he didn't get it. And instead, Sidonians absconded with it, and King Tabni inscribed his own inscription at the base in very lovely, nice Phoenician letters. And this is the inscription. And as you can see, there's a real emphasis. He's mostly concerned with no one disturbing the sarcophagus. He said, don't open this, don't open this. There's nothing in here. There's no gold, there's no silver. You will be cursed. Astarte doesn't like it when you do this. Don't open this sarcophagus, you will be cursed, and you will never be able to, your soul will not rest with the ancestors if you disturb this grave. And it's interesting because it's a rare example of an inscription on a sarcophagus. For these Anthropoid ones that develop after this, they don't have inscriptions that we know of unless they were painted and the paint is faded. They come in a lot of different forms. I should say that this wasn't the only one they took. There was 2 others, but they were unfinished. So it's thought that maybe they got their hands on a workshop and just took off with 3 of them. But and then the other 2 were also reused to bury elite members of the Sidonian royal family. But the trend seemed to spread to not just the royal family, but to any Sidonian with enough money to buy a marble sarcophagus, because these are made in marble from the Greek, mostly from the Greek islands, I think. And there's a lot of variety in the faces. Part of that has to do with the skills of the sculptors, of course, but some of it has to do with trends and styles. So some of them look more Egyptianizing, with that guy who's rocking the Nemesis headdress. But then others seem to take inspiration from Greek archaic art, with the curls here and the long strands. And so there's a lot of variety that probably has to do with styles, trends, and how good a sculptor you could commission to work on your sarcophagus. But they are very individualistic, and so it seems to me that this is probably these objects might be the closest way we have to encountering actual Phoenician individuals. Because unlike the Greeks, they didn't really represent themselves that much in art. Lots of abstract symbols, lots of gods, and so forth, but not so much portraits of themselves. And this is the closest thing we have to such a genre. Just to finish up somewhat quickly, I wanted to do 2 examples of archaeological studies that have been done that relate to Phoenician commerce and craft. And the first has to do with the famous Tyrian purple. So one craft that's tied specifically to Phoenicians is purple dye manufacture, and then cloths, textiles that are dyed with that color. And purple cloth shows up in tribute lists that were paid to the Assyrian kings. And then by the time of the Roman Empire, purple cloth is especially popular. It's the fabric favored by emperors and other elites. And by that point, the Phoenicians, especially Tyre, are closely associated with the highest quality purple dye, that which is under most demand. And we read that in both Pliny, remember the natural historian, as well as Strabo, the geographer. Pliny the Elder describes the process in detail, and it's not quite right. People have tried to make it, and his process doesn't really work. But he's not completely wrong. There's been a lot of experiments to replicate it, and the process is quite cumbersome. So there's 3 different species of snails that can be used, 2 of which that were used. 2 of them are represented here. And basically, the source of the dye is the mucus produced by a predatory sea snail that's found widely in the Mediterranean. The snails have to be harvested. Basically, you get the snail, you crush it, you extract the gland from it. And then the glands are mixed with salt and simmered for several days. We're told that it smelled really bad. People are very consistent on this. And then, though, after it's been simmered for several days, it has to be mixed with something to make it alkaline enough so that it can be absorbed by the fabric properly. And they seem to use different things, potash, lime, or even urine, in order to get the chemical mix correct. And then the textiles are dipped in the cloth, and then they're exposed to air. And the oxidizing process is important because then the dye reoxidizes and the color appears. And it's not just purple, it's actually a whole range of colors, ranging from a dusty pink all the way to blue. It depends on a variety of different factors, as you can imagine. But so I mean that's the general process, but we don't really know how, as an industry, how it was scaled up as a manufacturing process. And in fact, most of our evidence for purple dye manufacturing comes in the form of piles of shells, piles of damaged shells, and they pop up all over the place. So there's a story that the Phoenicians created it, or discovered purple dye. There's a story about how Melkart was wandering with the nymph Tyros on the beach, and this dog bit into his shell, and then his mouth turned purple. And the nymph thought it was such a great color, she begged for cloth to be dyed this color. And thus you have the origins of the industry. And this was a myth popular in the Roman times. Enough so that the Tyrians put it on their coins at the bottom. It's hard to see there, but you've got, of course, now you know the standing stones at the temple of Melkart. And below that, that's a dog, and that's a shell. A murex shell. Sometimes the coins just have a murex shell by itself. But it wasn't the Phoenicians, sorry to say, who discovered it. A lot of you asked me about Minoans. Yes, the earliest evidence we have is in Crete. So in the mid-2nd millennium. And then the process seems to have spread quite quickly to the Levant in the mid-2nd millennium. But it seems what the Phoenicians did is that they once again seem to develop the process to kind of harness the market and do it in such a way that they get associated with the best dyes in the Mediterranean. We must assume it's clever marketing on their part. But in fact, purple dye was created all over the place. We find examples, evidence of it all over the place, like I said, with these piles of shells and so forth. What we don't find very often is actual installations because they're hard to identify, as you can imagine, because when we do find them, they're just a bunch of pits with channels running to them. We found one actually at a site that I work at in Israel in Tel Dor, and the big hint was that these pits were lined with lime and with stone, and they had a very distinctive color, purple. And so we tested it and found that it did indeed have the chemical compound that comes from these snails responsible for the dye. I wanted to show this to you as an example of kind of the future of Phoenician studies in terms of archaeology, various chemical analyses. And if you'll bear with me for one more example, I have something even more interesting that has to do with archaeology and chemical analysis. And that has to do with the contents of pottery. Now, Phoenician pottery is not the most exciting pottery in the Mediterranean, not by a long shot. It seems to be designed to be more on the functional side of things, especially for transport and storage and so forth. But we have these interesting, but there's more we can do than just study pottery for its style or aesthetics now. We can, thanks to different types of isotope and residue analysis, we can start to actually analyze the contents of vessels if they are excavated and preserved properly. So, and that's exactly what's happened here. And what I'm summarizing is a very recent study done by a colleague of mine, the director of the Dor excavation, Aya Gilboa, and her colleague. And it showed us some very interesting results. So what they did is they looked at these small flasks. And they're quite small. They're decorated. And they studied them first, the fabric, the actual pottery fabric. That's how we talk about the ceramics. And they confirmed that these flasks are manufactured in Phoenicia, in the Levantine coast where the Phoenician city-states were on the clay analysis. But what they also noticed is that they are being exported to different locations, up and down the coast and also Cyprus. They're also this particular type is decorated, which is rare. And so they hypothesized that there must be something special about what was contained in these ones because they're decorated. They also have they're very thick-walled, and they have a very, very small neck. The inside is very, very narrow in order to keep liquid from coming out too quickly. So the research question was, well, what was in these? What was so special? And so they did some residue analysis, and what they discovered in 40% of the flasks that they tested, that they found a particular substance, cinnamaldehyde. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. But it's the marker for cinnamon. And now cinnamon is native to South and Southeast Asia. It was not, as far as we know, grown elsewhere in the world at this time. Now, the spice trade to South and Southeast Asia was known, but we know it from around the Hellenistic period onwards. There's textual evidence and also some archaeological evidence. So 300 BC onwards. What we didn't know is that it was happening so early. And the fact that we have so many of the flasks with this material in it suggests that this is an ongoing proper trade, especially because the flasks that were tested are from different contexts spanning over 150 years. So this seems to be a regular, ongoing trade connection. And not only that, it's a secondary manufacturing kind of process, if you will, a secondary industry, because the cinnamon would have had to make it from South Asia or Southeast Asia to the Levant, and then it was mixed with something else and put into these flasks. They did find other materials in there, trace materials, but not enough to identify what the liquid was. But it was clearly mixed with some sort of liquid and put in these flasks, and then exported around the Eastern Mediterranean. And so this is significant because basically, before this was discovered, we had no idea that the spice trade was so prominent this early. There's speculation maybe it had gone as early as the 5th century, based on some other texts, but now we have conclusive proof that there was the spice trade going on in the Eastern Mediterranean as early as the 11th century or 10th century, they say 10th century or 9th century BCE, in the early Iron Age, which really kind of starts to shift our assumptions about what was going on with trade routes in this part of the world. And as I was talking with someone at the beginning, there's a lot of focus on Phoenicians and the West. And what this discovery perhaps suggests is that we should start focusing more about Phoenicians and trade routes to the east, especially this corridor of the Red Sea and down to the Arabian Sea and around into the Indian Ocean, or even down through what is now the Persian Gulf or the Arabian Gulf through Mesopotamia. And there's a lot of work to be done in this area. Still a lot of discoveries to be made. So just to sum up, due to a lack of written sources, the Phoenicians will never be as accessible to us as some other peoples in antiquity. But with continued study of the material remains, both old objects that were found a long, long time ago, as well as new discoveries and new techniques that let us extract new data, the Phoenicians will, over time, hopefully become a little bit less elusive. Thank you for your attention. Sorry, I feel like I didn't mean to do that. Yes?
There was a program last year about a hilltop settlement in Israel where they discovered practically large manufacturing facilities for pottery and olive production. And the vessels they've established, they've found the same vessels in Spain. So they know that those vessels were used to export olive oil. That was around about 700 BC. Could the cinnamaldehyde story not also fit in there?
So there's no evidence, but yes, certainly, and the authors of the study speculate that then it wasn't just traded around the Eastern Mediterranean, it may have been traded further west. We just don't have the evidence to say that at this point, but it's entirely possible.